Hello and welcome back to Inside the Helmet. My name is Michael. I am your host this fine Wednesday evening. I am joined once again, if you heard or saw last week's episode, you already know him, my father.
Well, thank you. Nice to be back, and hope you keep inviting me back. I had a lot of fun last week.
Yeah, we'll see. Um, First up, we can jump right into this. I believe you had a question for me.
I do. As we've talked about kind of off air, the inside the helmet, we realize that not everybody out there who's sitting in the stands has ever put on a helmet and been on the field and on the sidelines and at practice and in the locker room. And the people who have done that kind of maybe know some of this, but I know a lot of people who've never been exposed to it. And so our first segment, we usually want to dedicate to talking about what kind of goes on behind the scenes. And for today, I wanted to ask you about specifically the locker room. That's kind of a sanctuary where all the players go, and we know they change into their uniforms and everything else. Um, but you always hear this term about locker room culture. And I know, Michael, you've been a part, and I've been a part of a whole lot of different locker rooms. And can you give us some insights about maybe what the importance of a good locker room culture is? What goes on behind the scenes that the average fan doesn't get to see?
For sure. The way I kind of think of it is that there's kind of three levels to it. The top level is like the top, button up, act all professional. That's the game. That's where you're on TV or you're in front of fans and whatnot. That's when it's time to be all business and whatnot. And then you have level two, which is practice. It's still behind the scenes and whatnot, but there are coaches out there and whatnot, and you're still out there to get work done and stuff. So you still have to be pretty locked in and whatnot. But then the locker room is that final stage where, not even the coaches are really in there for the most part. It's just the players, just dudes being dudes around each other. There's usually someone with a Bluetooth speaker playing music and whatnot. People are laughing, joking around, messing with each other. There are times where some guys, for whatever reason, will just start wrestling or whatever. And it's all in good fun. It's not any bad natured stuff of any kind. Yeah, it's honestly just the best way I can put it is it is where the guys can just kind of come together and be in the same area without being policed or without having to put on this like, okay, time to go to work, time to, practice, time to play a game, all that. It's where they can kind of let their hair down, so to speak.
In my experience, and tell me if this is still true, because it's been many, many years since I was inside of a locker room, but I
Yeah,
assume
they
that it,
invented the forward pass in that time, I
yeah,
think.
right, haha. Um, so I assume it's still true, though, that the best teams have they've developed a bond, and they develop a bond away from the field, and that didn't necessarily mean when practice is over that they're going to go have meals together and hang out. They might be tired of seeing each other, but the locker room is that in between the real world and the field, where guys are just changing into and out of uniforms and that type of thing and having conversations. And at least back when I played, I was fortunate. We always had good locker rooms and a lot of humor and a lot of teasing and, like you said, guys being guys. But I think that's important to have a good locker room culture in order to have a good team. Can you talk about the correlation between those two?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Especially when you get to, the college and the professional level of football, basically every single person there, every single athlete is going to be a very, very good football player, of course. Otherwise, they wouldn't be playing at such a high level. So basically every team you're going to come across is going to have some degree of good athletes. So what separates then the really successful teams from the ones that don't find so much success is that team culture. It's how well do these guys, who are all very talented, how do they all put it together into one team and work together and that sort of thing.
I
And the
think in the
locker room is definitely a big part of that, being able to, not only work together on the field, but have that connection off the field is very important because then it just makes everything else come naturally when you like the people that you're around.
right, and I think that the leadership, if you walk into a locker room and kind of see who's leading the conversations and the teasing and the humor and the or even sometimes when it's the person who stands up and says, hey, it's time to get serious. But I think leadership is actually, the seeds of leadership at least are planted in the locker room. Now you can't have a fourth string player uh become a leader just because they're the funniest guy in the locker room, but you understand what I mean about your key players uh, have to kind of control the locker room culture, don't they?
Of course, yeah, that kind of ties into what I just mentioned about how the best teams work together. The best teams are able to work together so well and find that success because it's player led. They don't need, coaches to, kick them in the rear end to get them going, to get them to work together as a team, to get them to be productive. The best teams have that leadership, from somebody who is, obviously well liked, but also respected and listened to as not necessarily authority, because then we're starting to talk about them as if they're a coach, but that kind of deal where they have that respect, they have that just recognition of a common cause.
I would say that's probably something that's universal and timeless. What you just said there, that
Hmm.
it was probably true back in my era, true in your era, and if you have grandsons that play football, it'll probably be true in their era as well.
Yeah.
How important that locker room culture is. But you were talking about key players a minute ago, and one of the people that we talked about last week, who certainly was a key point of focus, was Arch Manning.
Hmm.
And but when we recorded last week's show, we were anticipating, wondering what was going to happen with the Texas OU game. Big game every year, of course. And I got to admit, I was really surprised. I was kind of afraid, even though I'm a diehard Texas Longhorn fan, just hadn't seen enough out of Texas to think that they were going to take on OU, especially with their starting quarterback coming back. But Arch Manning and Texas pulled it out convincingly. I didn't realize until it was pointed out, Oklahoma has not scored a touchdown against the Longhorns in the last 3 years. And so big credit to the defense. But since we talked about Arch last week in particular, I wanted to ask you, as a fellow quarterback, Arch has gotten more hype and more eyes on him than anybody I can think of in recent memory. And up until the OU game, the reviews were not all that great. He had moments, but everybody was talking about, well, he's a bust, he's a disappointment. But I thought he played within himself, played reasonably well, got the ball to the playmakers. And what I want to ask you though is about something like that. I watched Arch after the game. He went and ran down to Old Smoky, the big cannon, and pulled the cannon cord and got to fire the cannon and looked like a big weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Can one game really make that much of a difference in the psyche of a quarterback, especially somebody like Arch Manning? I mean, you've played quarterback for a dozen years or more at all kind of different levels, and I know it's a big confidence thing, but I wanted your thoughts on where this could take Arch Manning. Could it really level him up?
I think it absolutely does only take one game in certain circumstances. Now, if Texas had come out and played against a team like Sam Houston or San Jose State again, and Arch had played well, then I don't think it would be that big of a confidence booster because anyone can recognize the skill level of the opponent compared to the skill level of Texas. That's a game they're expected to win. But in the case of what happened this past weekend, you come in against a very highly ranked opponent when you yourself were high ranked at one point, but you've completely fallen off of the top 25 board entirely. To come into such a big important game against a good opponent, and to have a performance like that absolutely is a confidence booster, despite it only being one game. Also, I also heard that statistic you threw out about OU not scoring a touchdown against Texas in the past 5 years. I also saw that, and it was actually they haven't scored a touchdown in three of the last four. I think 3 years ago they scored a touchdown or something like that. I think they beat
Oh,
us that year.
oh. Well, I mean, we'll
Uh,
give Oklahoma credit when they earn it, but not unless they earn it. Um,
exactly.
as far as the one game, I just quick flashback. We don't talk about it very much, especially on the show, but I happen to remember a game in when what you played when you were in high school,
Oh boy.
and played a really good opponent, a high scoring opponent, and I think you wound up throwing 6 or 7 touchdowns in the game, and somehow or another your team lost. I guess defense was not tackling anybody that night. And I remember
Yeah.
asking some of my friends, "What do I do here as a dad?" Because my kid threw 7 touchdowns last night and he lost. And I want to tell him, how proud I was the way that he played, but he's down that they lost the game. But I saw a different swagger in you after that game. Uh, not that you didn't have swagger before or anything, but it was just this quiet confidence that, like, well, hey, I just threw 7 touchdowns. And I don't know, psychologically, that's where I'm trying to get about what you experienced maybe with that, and maybe what we could wind up seeing out of Arch Manning, who's taken so much criticism after he had the big game in the big moment.
Absolutely. And yeah, the having those types of performances, performing well in a game that you ultimately lose, but you lose because of somebody else, or the other side of the ball, like you said, the defense not being able to stop them. We actually ended up losing that game by multiple scores, despite
Yeah,
my 7 touchdowns, which is
right.
insane. It's the most insane game of football I've ever been a part of by
I,
far.
I remember it
Um,
well.
because I, but it's so tricky because obviously you want to value, at least you should value, the team success over any personal glory. I would rather, and it's not even close. I would rather throw 7 picks and win versus 7 touchdowns and lose.
Sure.
I
But if
value
you
the
throw
success
seven
of the
picks, you're
team.
not starting next week, so maybe that's a stretch.
Yeah, but that's another thing.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, but it's also important to be realistic with yourself, because I could have very easily come away from that game saying, "Oh yeah, I threw 7 touchdowns, but we lost, so I guess I should have thrown 10." I threw 7 touchdowns, but I'm still not good enough. I could have come away still beating myself up over that, but at some point you have to look yourself in the mirror, and say, look, this is not on me. All right. I just had an outstanding performance. I did everything I needed to do in order to put us in a position to win, and we still weren't able to do it. And obviously, you don't go that route to try and hype yourself up and get a big ego. You go that route to kind of as a way of self preservation. You know, as a way of not getting so down, because when you perform really well in a loss, those are some of the most painful losses, because you feel like, oh, I only get
agreed.
so many of these really good games,
Yep.
in my
Yep.
life, and I just wasted one in a game we lost.
Yeah. No, good point.
So,
And that's what makes football the ultimate team game, I believe. Speaking of teams, our favorite team, we make no secret about it, no apologies. We
yeah.
live in Texas and have been diehard Cowboy fans from the beginning. at least since I was 10 years old, which is 50 years ago. So
Wow.
yeah, and you grew up, of course, in a household with Dallas Cowboys and everything else. So let's talk about the Cowboy game. Geez. They
Yeah.
got into a tight one with the Panthers and wound up losing on a walk-off field goal to the Panthers, who you don't think of the Panthers as being, yeah, they got some good players, obviously, but you
You
don't think
do.
of them as being a powerhouse.
No.
But to lose 30-27, a fairly high scoring game, not as high scoring as some that the Cowboys have been in, but I don't know. What were your thoughts there as you kind of watched how that game played out? It was a frustrating game for me to watch.
Well, for me, it was kind of a slow burn because, of course, we had so much momentum because we finished off the first half very strong, of course, taking a nice, comfortable lead up against the Panthers. But then just the second half kind of felt like it kind of felt like watching your car slowly tip over a cliff and hoping that it's going to like balance out and not fall over, but then ultimately it does. But all you can do is just sit there and watch because what you're not strong enough to hold a car up.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of those where you're still holding out hope, but you're just seeing it all collapse in front of you, and it was absolutely gut wrenching to watch all of that. And I remember you said last week that this is one of those games that it's important for the Cowboys to win against these teams that they're expected to beat because later on in the season, when they're maybe fighting for a playoff spot, maybe fighting for a wild card, I know obviously it's ambitious to hope that we could still win the division, of course, with the likes of the Eagles in our division, unfortunately. But when we're fighting for a playoff spot, that losing to a very beatable opponent will come back to bite us.
Yeah, I mean, with the Panthers, it was the offense continues to score points, and I love seeing the fact that we actually have a running game. Javante Williams has been a great surprise coming over from Denver. George Pickens kind of naturally jumped into the wide receiver one position while we're waiting
Mhm.
for CeeDee Lamb to come back. And I did see today they said Jerry Jones said he expects CeeDee Lamb and Cavante Turpin to be back in the lineup maybe
Very good.
for the next game, which would be good.
Yeah.
And the offensive line, they can't get the same five guys on the field game to game, but I think the backups have been performing pretty admirably. I mean, if you put up 27 points or 30 points or something like that, it's hard to be too critical. What I think really was distressing to me is starting back about 2018, if I had to place it. Cowboys made the playoffs and they got beat by the Rams back then. If you remember that game, I think it was about
I think I do,
2018.
yeah.
And they got beat decisively by the Rams in the playoffs. And the reason they got beat, that was back when what was his name? Todd Gurley was still playing.
I,
And
I, I remember that.
Todd Gurley was the Rams running back, and they ran it up the middle. Cowboys had no defensive tackles, no bulk in the middle, and they could not stop a basic, trap play or draw play or off tackle play. Nothing within the hash marks, and they really have never solved that problem. And the thing is, the players they have at defensive tackle have got pedigree. They're not horrible. They're not small, but essentially what I saw the Panthers do, it wasn't always running up the middle, but what I saw the Panthers do was bleed out the last 6 minutes of the clock. And they would get to 3rd and 2, and the Cowboys know that they're going to run. And here they go running again for 3 yards and just keep moving the sticks. And so the Cowboys never touched the ball again. So that one was really on the defense. And I know Eberflus, the new defensive coordinator, is taking a lot of heat for it. Jerry Jones
He-
gave him his vote of confidence, which sometimes can be a bad thing. Um,
yeah.
but that was the discouraging part. Is you're sitting there going, okay, get them off the field, or at least At least hold them once they get to the 30-yard line. It's they're good. They're going to kick a field goal and go ahead, but you got to stop them so that you have a minute and a half left.
Indeed.
And they just couldn't do it, and that was the yeah
Yeah.
distressing part to me.
To add a little bit more commentary onto the Cowboys' defensive struggles, if you follow Inside the Helmet on Instagram, which you definitely should, if you're listening to this and you haven't already followed, please do. Um, but I put out a post the other day on Monday, I believe, going into it was basically me venting my frustrations with the Cowboys defense this season because I'm full on the Matt Eberflus hate train. I think he's got to go and all that. I don't understand why he still has a job in Dallas. And I certainly hope he doesn't for much longer. But I went and did a little research. Did you know that the Cowboys will, just to put it bluntly, have the worst defense in the league?
Yeah, and one of the
They're
best offenses.
exactly they literally have like the best offense in the league and the worst defense in the league. They have by far and away the worst pass defense in the league. They've allowed like the most yards, the most touchdowns. They've only intercepted opposing quarterbacks 2 times and whatnot. And their run defense isn't much better. They're like bottom five easily, probably bottom three run defense. I don't have all the stats off the top of my head. I'd have to go look at it again. Um, But I one thing that was really interesting to me is I found that the Cowboys by far have run the most separate ratio of man coverage to zone coverage, with man coverage being run so far significantly less often. The Cowboys have run, I believe this is correct. They've run man coverage on about 8 to 9% of all defensive snaps,
Hmm.
whereas they've run zone coverage like 80 whatever percent.
And after the Jets game, which is the Cowboys' best defensive game, I saw a quote from Trayvon Diggs saying that he had been lobbying for more man defense, and that they implemented that against the Jets.
And
And
we
as
won.
we saw what happened, the
Hmm.
defense looked great with man defense. So I surprised that when they found something that worked like that, that the very next week against the Panthers, that they would switch to a zone defense, switch back to their zone defense. I mean, Bryce Young, clearly had a great college career, but has not made his mark in the NFL yet. Still trying to
Yeah.
prove himself. Why wouldn't they go with what works and say beat our best defense instead of zone defense? Real quick, not to get too far aside, but again, you've played quarterback. You've gone
Yeah.
against zone defenses. You've gone against man
Mhm.
defenses, and can you take us through just for people, again, I'm talking to the fans up there who've never been on the field and experienced this. Is there really a difference of throwing against a man defense or a zone defense, and why?
Absolutely. Yeah, it changes basically everything because in an offense at any sort of high level of football, you're going to have plays that you're going to be trying to call. Maybe not entire plays, but you're going to have concepts that you're going to want to run against man versus zone defense. And a lot of it is up to the quarterback to, recognize that the line before you give your cadence and have the ball snapped, you have to recognize what the coverage is and all that, so you know where to go with the ball. Let's say maybe on the left side you have a coverage that okay, over the week in film you watched that when this team is when this team is defending against the 2nd and 8 situation, they run this type of zone defense. So okay, come 2nd and 8, you call a play that's trying to attack that and whatnot. Football is the greatest game of chess ever. It's a great physical game of chess, trying to guess what your opponent is going to do based on what you've seen, what you've studied, and then trying to go and match it and beat it with your own scheme, and then they're trying to do the same thing to you.
And with zone defense, each defender is guarding a certain area. You could almost draw a circle around them, and
And
that's their
all
area to
defenders are, yeah.
area.
If
Yeah,
you've ever played Madden,
that's their area to guard, and so
hmm
there should be gaps in between
exactly,
those circles if you can
yeah.
thread the ball in just the right
And
time. Whereas with
those are called
man,
zone beaters.
yeah, and with man defense, whoever is lined up across from you typically is just going to run with you wherever you go and try to cover you. So, yeah, frustrating week for the Cowboys. But if I'm being honest, I didn't go into the season with great expectations, and
Yeah.
so I'm not as disappointed as I might have been otherwise. So I know each week inside the helmet, there's different types of helmets. There's football helmets, which are my favorite, but you're also a big fan of F1, and those guys
hmm
wear helmets too. And
They do.
so, yeah, I know talking to you before the show, you were telling me there was a maybe major development that happened this week. You were kind of piecing everything together and saying, well, you know, I don't want to steal your thunder. I want you to talk about it.
Yeah.
That something that might have flown under the radar, which could have big time ramifications down the road for F1. Tell us what you saw.
Yeah. So, so Max Verstappen, of course, if you know F1, you know him. Even if you have never heard of Formula One, you may have heard of Max Verstappen. He is one of the greatest humans to ever sit behind the wheel of a car of any
He's the
kind.
Michael Jordan of F1, as they
As
say.
we determined
Yes,
last episode, yes,
yes.
67-time F1 race winner, four-time champion. He's I don't know, been on the podium more times than he hasn't. All that, all the accolades, all the fame, all the money, all that. He's the guy. He for the past at least the past 4 years, because he's the reigning four-time consecutive champion. At least the past 4 years, he's been the best driver in the world, and many, including me, still say that he is. Um, well, he, of course, has been with the Red Bull Racing F1 team since 2016. And he's been with the Red Bull Racing organization, because Red Bull, all F1 teams are more than just the team. They have like whole junior driver development programs and whatnot. And Max has been with Red Bull since 2014, 2015, when he was rising through the junior ranks, because he did so at a very young age. He's the youngest person to ever debut in F1, doing so when he was just 17. In fact, they actually changed the rule to not allow you to do that anymore. Now you have to be 18. Um, anyway, point is, he's been with the Red Bull organization his entire F1 life, we'll say. But there's another team, there's another organization that's been wanting to get their mitts on Max for a very long time before he ever signed with Red Bull, and that's Mercedes. Um, of course, Mercedes, are synonymous with Lewis Hamilton, of course, seven-time world champion, 104, 105, whatever race wins to his name. He's the big record holder, of course, because he's been doing it for very long. But Max, of course, is coming along through his career and breaking records of his own. Anyway, Mercedes have been trying to get their hands on Max ever since he was a teenager. Of course, they saw the potential of him rising up through the junior ranks, but Red Bull came in and scooped him up before they could make room for him, because Red Bull were able to guarantee Max an F1 seat before Mercedes could. So Mercedes have watched as Max has grown and dominated F1 the past half a decade, basically. Um, and lately, there have been talks of them finally getting their hands on him, because Max has been growing ever more frustrated with Red Bull as they have seen their dominance and their spot at the top taken down a peg or two or three. Personnel have left or been fired. The car hasn't been where he wants it to be. And so some people have speculated since the beginning of this season, that he might be looking for a way out. And the overwhelming consensus is that if Max were to end up leaving Red Bull, it would be to go to Mercedes, because we know that Mercedes loves Max, and there's potential that Max loves them right back. But there's a problem. Mercedes has two drivers. Of course, they have George Russell, who's been with the Mercedes Junior program, um, being brought up and whatnot. And he's been with the Mercedes F1 team since 2022. And then they have Kimi Antonelli, who's their new golden boy of sorts. Of course, a rookie and whatnot, being brought straight from Formula 2 straight into the big team, not being put in a smaller team also managed by Mercedes or any of that. But regardless, there have been talks of whether Mercedes will drop George or Kimi to make way for Max, obviously, because you can only field two drivers and whatnot. But today, actually, we got some news that George Russell and Kimi Antonelli were extended with the Mercedes F1 team for 1 year through 2026. Of course, that next year, F1 is getting a massive regulation overhaul when it comes to car design and car construction, essentially. And so many people are saying that the entire order of teams may be flipped on its head and whatnot. And so that's another big reason why many speculate Max may seek a move to a different team if it turns out that under these new regulations, Red Bull could be not quite so fast. They could fall down the order, and then Max isn't in a car capable of winning races, winning championships, which, of course, that's
Sure.
what he wants to do. That's what everyone wants to do. But Max has that pedigree. He has that just history. He has the records. He has the success that it all speaks for itself, that he is the hot commodity, that any team would bend over backwards to get their hands on him. And I find it interesting that George Russell has been the driver mainly talked about being replaced by Max, because Kimi Antonelli is the young, they're kind of new golden boy, their version of Max. So
Hmm.
many say that they wouldn't want to get rid of him because he's still young and developing and could grow to be better than George ever has been. Um, but that this all leads me to my main point of that George Russell, of course, is a very, very talented driver in his own right. He's a multiple time race winner. He's won two races this year, in a year that was seemingly dominated by McLaren and whatnot. He's found a way to, snag two race victories of his own right, and in rather dominant fashion. It hasn't just been, oh, he was in the right place at the right time. No, he's a legitimately very good driver. Some would argue, has been a top three driver this season, based on relative performance, and yet he's being talked about being replaced. And I want to I guess, get your opinion as well, um, of how does that dynamic make sense?
Well,
Um,
my knowledge of F1 is typically limited to whatever you tell me.
yeah.
Not a sport I have spent any time with. I know about Max Verstappen because you have shirts and jerseys and that type of thing, and I know you've been a fan for a long time. So
Hmm.
uh, I do know this, that anytime that you have somebody kind of designated the king of a sport, they have a window of time. When I was a kid, I think back to the people who were the kings of football, baseball, basketball, and eventually Father Time catches up, their skills diminish, and they're replaced by new people. You know as well as I do, we've talked so much about it over the years. When I was a kid, my heroes were Roger Staubach and Drew Pearson.
Hmm.
And eventually they stopped playing because everybody has to stop playing. And back on, not to get back on the Cowboys, but then they went through some down years, and then next you had the triplets come along in the early '90s: Aikman, Irvin, and Smith. And so Max has got his time here at the top, and there will come a day when Max is not the top F1 guy.
For
He's
sure.
the yesterday's news, and he'll be replaced. And that's the way it is in all sports.
Yeah,
And if this maybe represents the very first beginnings of some guy who's going to eventually come and take that throne. Now, in the case of not to get off topic and everything too much, but in the case of Michael Jordan, I will always say, because I lived through the Jordan years, I have never seen an athlete like that in any sport. And all the people who want to argue that, well, this person came along and replaced Jordan, and that person is better than Jordan. Yeah, if you lived through it, I don't think you would ever hold that opinion. But for the most part, there's always a new king. Is my point. And if the new king's not here, the new king's on the way. So
for
maybe that's
sure.
starting to happen with F1. Maybe it's not. Max will have however many years to be the king, and then there will be another king. So
I
I, I know that you and I had talked after last week's show where we basically were. It's like we were talking in our living room. We're not even watching the clock, and I think we went very much overtime. So,
Yeah, an
so we
hour and
want
25 minutes.
yeah. So in the interest of keeping this a little bit shorter, I
Hmm.
know that we like to end the show by talking about a couple of games and just kind of analyzing them, making our picks, that type of thing. Were you able to kind of look through the schedule and find a couple of games that you wanted to talk about?
I've got three. We can start, of course, with the Cowboys, who are welcoming the Washington football team into Jerry World on Sunday at 3:25 p.m.
Don't even know what to call them anymore. They were the football team, and now they're the Commanders. All the years when
Hmm.
I was a kid growing up, they were the Washington Redskins.
Yeah,
Uh, I was surprised Washington lost last week, and I thought that they, after last season, were this team on the rise, and they probably still are.
for
But
sure.
young teams, especially with young leaders, Jaden Daniels is just great. I
Hmm.
hate to say that as a Cowboys fan, but let's be honest. He's
Yeah,
a great young quarterback, and
for sure.
I don't know what to expect out of the Cowboys. That's why it's hard for me to pick. My heart says Cowboys, no matter who they play, but a lot of times you get a team on the rise, which the Commanders appear to be, despite losing last week, and they're hungry, and this game kind of worries me. I mean, I really thought the Cowboys would handle the Panthers and maybe struggle with the Commanders, and now both teams are hungry. They both lost last week, so they both have something to prove. So I'm looking for. My prediction is I don't know about the score because I don't know which Cowboys defense will show up. Can they actually stop? But I think hungry teams tend to hit harder. So I'm looking for a very physical, kind of violent game, to be honest, because both teams are desperate.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with that notion. One thing I've noticed, of course, you already mentioned how young and kind of up on the rise the Commanders are.
Yeah.
And for me, that speaks to inconsistency. This team's still young. This team's still kind of figuring out their way and whatnot, and that leaves the door open for a more experienced and maybe slightly older team to come in and catch them off guard of sorts.
Where are they playing? Do you know?
They're playing in Dallas. That's why I said Jerry World.
Okay. I wasn't
Yeah,
listening for that part. So
yeah,
I'll give it to the Cowboys because they're playing at home. But
hmm
Washington, yeah, I mean, I grew up hating the Redskins because they were the arch enemy before the Eagles were,
yeah,
and so I don't want to give them too much credit, but yeah, I would not be shocked if Washington walked out of there with a victory, but we'll see. Um,
yeah.
what's
I agree with that. Before we move on to the next game, just one more little nugget of commentary. If if you had asked me who would win this game, if it was the very up and down, very inconsistent on defense, particularly Cowboys from this season versus the Commanders that we saw from last season that just
yeah,
looked so electric
yeah.
and unstoppable at times, honestly, with Jaden Daniels. I would say Commanders by a mile. Unfortunately, I would grit my teeth through saying that, but there have been multiple times this year where, like we mentioned, the Commanders themselves have had their inconsistencies, had their struggles, and lost games that I felt were winnable. And so I honestly feel like these two teams are kind of a situation where it's two sides of the same coin. You know, they're struggling against beatable teams, but for a little bit different reasons, of course. So
Look
I
for a
also agree.
shootout,
Yeah, I
high
like
scoring
that
game.
honestly. I
Yeah,
like that
high scoring
prediction.
game.
High
Yeah.
scoring game. I agree. I'll also take the Cowboys. I'll take them by a touchdown.
Well, you're voting with your heart. I know, same as me.
And
So what's
how could I not?
right? Exactly. What's your
Um,
second game?
Next up, two teams also kind of on the rise. The Giants and the Broncos are playing in Denver on
Ooh,
Sunday afternoon.
ooh, yeah. So Broncos really impressed me last year with Bo Nix, who I saw in college, and thought this guy looks legit. He's a winner, and was not at all surprised to see him win the starting job with Denver as the quarterback.
For
I
sure.
think it did surprise a lot of people, and probably a bigger surprise. Golly, I mean, the Giants who were so awful the last couple of years. And, they started the season with Russell Wilson. And I don't think anybody, no offense to Russell, he was great in his time, but I don't think anybody was excited in Giants world that Russell Wilson was going to be your starting quarterback on week one. And I have
Except for
not
when they
seen,
played us.
well, yeah.
Yeah.
They drafted Jackson Dart. I know the first thing that stood out to me was, yeah, what a cool name, right? I know
Yeah,
nothing
of
about him other than the scouting reports and whatnot. Now, I did
course.
unfortunately get to see more than I wanted to of Cam Scatterbo, the running back, because our beloved Longhorns played them in the college football playoffs, and I mean, he gave the Longhorns all they wanted. So I knew a
Yeah.
little bit about him, but apparently Jackson Dart is as a rookie just walking in there and acting like he owns the place, right?
He certainly is. I think I've seen a little bit more of Jackson Dart, at least since he's gotten to the NFL. I know particularly him and Cam Scadaboo have quite the bond. They're they kind of give off the same energy as like bulldogs. You
Yeah,
know, they're scrappy. They have a lot of heart. They'll run through a brick wall for their team. And in the case of Cam Scadaboo, he actually literally tries to get himself hyped up. Um, and honestly, I hate saying this. I hate saying anything good about a division rival, but it's exciting. I I find myself enjoying watching them.
yeah,
They do have a certain swagger about them, a certain confidence, despite being rookies. They have so much confidence in not only themselves, but in the team around them. And I feel like it's injected this sort of new life
Younger
into
players, I think, have more joy too,
for
because
sure. Yeah,
they're discovering, hey, maybe I can really do this, and the energy is very raw.
I
Um,
agree.
I think when it comes to this game, it's in Denver. I've been in Denver before, and I know they call it a mile high city because the oxygen is thinner. And
Yeah,
sometimes teams will get out there a few days early trying to adjust to that, but that's always given the Denver Broncos at least a slight advantage in that area. Um, and I, I say this having not seen Jackson Dart, but I did watch Bo Nix last year, and I was so impressed that he was calm in the pocket. He made good reads. He seemed more like a veteran than a rookie. And I'm going to give the nod to the Broncos just because I know sometimes rookies, week to week, they can look great one week and then horrible the next. And I'm assuming that Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo, etc., they're going to have some down games in there. And I think probably going into Denver may be one of those.
I I agree with that notion. I don't know if you realize this, but this is a matchup of the two teams to have beaten the Eagles this
Yeah.
season.
Yeah.
Um, of
Interesting.
course, the Giants doing so on a more dominant fashion than the Broncos did. You know, scraping by on a failed Hail Mary attempt at the very end by the Eagles. Um, but yeah, what you just said about the about rookies being week to week is absolutely true. The first week that Jackson Dart got the starting role was against the then 3-0 Chargers,
Hmm.
and Jackson Dart and the Giants walked. I believe they walked into L.A. and took him down. You know, handed them their first loss of the season, and then they turn around and lose to the Saints,
Hmm.
who are one of the consensus worst teams in the NFL. And I think they may have
Yeah.
given them their first or maybe second win of the year. And then they
Yeah.
turn around and beat the Eagles, who were, of course, defending Super Bowl champions and at the time were 4-1.
Uh,
So definitely very up and down. And if the pattern is to be followed, then yeah, this is going to be a stinker if you're a Giants fan.
Well, the
Um,
Giants may wind up being a lot like the Falcons this season, where they lose big and then they win big and then they pull an upset against somebody, just kind of all over the place.
yeah,
Not to
very
get into the
unpredictable.
not to get into the Falcons game, but
Yeah.
as a Longhorn fan, so nice to see Bijan Robinson
Oh yeah.
uh, doing his thing in the NFL for the Falcons. The guy is just special. If you haven't
Hmm.
caught a Falcons game and you see one on TV, stop and watch the moves. Bijan Robinson, uh, one thing that always impressed me about him when he was at Texas, he was moving forward as he was juking players out. So many guys get the ball and their first instinct is to widen their stance and start shifting side to side, trying to figure out what hole they're going to cut into. But they haven't gained any yards. In fact, they're 2 or 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, and by the time they decide, the hole may be closed. Bijan Robinson, not on every play, but on most plays, gets the ball and he's moving forward and he's making those decisions as he's moving forward. And he actually reminds me. Sorry, I got off topic here, and we'll get back to the third pick game. But he
That's all right.
reminds me the running back that I remember see doing that when I was a kid was Tony Dorsett.
Ooh, good comparison.
Tony Dorsett would take the ball from the deep I formation. He was moving toward the line of scrimmage, moving forward as he was picking his hole. And of course, then he had the quick feet and the burst and the acceleration. And Bijan Robinson, I don't think it's too far removed to compare him to a Tony Dorsett style of runner. But anyway, I digress. What's our last game to pick?
I love that comparison, by the way. Our last game is the speaking of the Giants, it's their former guy, Daniel Jones, going up against the Chargers in Los Angeles, the team that we just
Oh,
mentioned. The
and the
Giants
Colt
handed them. their
And
first
the
loss of the year.
Colts are like 4-1 or something under Daniel Jones, who was a
Yeah,
bust in New York.
the
Okay,
Colts are
I'll tell you what.
red hot right
Uh,
now.
yeah, let's do something different on this game.
Okay.
You pick one team and tell me why they're going to win, and then whoever you don't pick, I'll pick the other team and I'll tell you why I think they're going to win.
All right, I like
Because
that.
to me, this is a toss up. But
Oh
go ahead,
man,
pick your team.
I like both teams. Can they tie?
Mhm.
No. I honestly I like the Chargers here. And I'll tell you why. The Chargers started red hot. Of course, they started 3-0, and then they dropped a few games ever since then. And I think that these past few weeks where they've been losing, excuse me, after starting so hot, um, it's been a real wake up call. And
Yeah,
I feel like Justin Herbert and is it Jim Harbaugh is their head coach? Is that
yeah,
the John is on the
yeah. I know
Ravens?
it's hard. Jim and John. Yeah,
Yep.
this is Jim.
Yep.
Yeah,
I feel like they've been looking at this game, kind of looking at how the Colts have kind of jumped out to the surprise success that they have been. I mean, the Chargers in their own right are still leading the AFC West and whatnot. I've been seeing posts all week about how the top four teams in the AFC right now are the Colts and the Patriots and the Chargers and the Steelers. Like those are all the division leaders, and it's like what is it, 2004 again? Um,
sure.
and
All
it's
right, so
pretty
you're
awesome
gonna
to
go.
see.
You're gonna go with the Chargers.
I'm gonna go with the Chargers. Honestly, in an upset, I think most people are thinking the Colts are gonna win because the Chargers kind of fell off. But I think that this is gonna be kind of a revenge, not necessarily against the Colts, but just kind of revenge in the sense of getting back on the right track for the
Funny thing,
Chargers.
funny thing is, if we were picking just straight up, I would pick the Chargers. I'll just be honest because
Really?
I think Justin Herbert is a special talent. I
Yeah.
like their defense with you know all the players that they've got over there, and Harbaugh is a winner. Even if sometimes he turns my stomach a little bit, but
Yeah.
he is. Uh, the Colts, so interesting. Daniel Jones uh, didn't work out in New York, and now I saw he's like either leading the league in some categories or second.
He's
Really
up
having a
there.
breakout season for him, and I know that a quarterback's best friend, of course, is a good running game. And who does he turn around and hand the ball to? Well, Jonathan Taylor, right?
Hmm.
Jonathan Taylor, we all watched in college, one of the not only the best running back when he came out, but one of the best running backs uh, over several seasons. So he has that luxury of having a strong running game, and I think that if the Colts are able to beat the Chargers, they're going to have to rely upon that running game and then play action passing. And in subsequent broadcasts, definitely want to have a discussion about the play action pass,
For sure.
the setting up of the play action pass, and the timing of when do you pull the trigger. So many things to talk about with the play action pass. It's one of my favorite plays. But uh, we'll save that for another time. But yeah, okay. The if the Colts win, I think it's because of their running game, because they have Jonathan Taylor. Daniel Jones, eh, great that he's having a great season. Apparently, a good guy and everything. But I think it all starts with the threat of Jonathan Taylor. And if I'm the Chargers, I'm stacking the line, stacking the box, not letting Taylor dominate the game, therefore not letting play action dominate the game, and I'm making Daniel Jones hopefully trying to turn him into the New York Giants version of Daniel Jones, and then the Chargers win. But um, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, to add on to that, even though I picked the Chargers, I have a thing to say about the Colts. The Colts, of course, have been known for their dominant offensive line in recent time, and I feel that that is also a luxury that Daniel Jones was not able to have in New York.
True.
And just having that offensive line, having that protection has allowed him to slow the game down mentally. Actually go through his progressions and make the throw rather than having to be essentially a one man team in New York.
Yeah.
And
No,
so,
no,
yeah,
good point.
I agree. For the Chargers to win this game on Sunday, they're going to have to win at the line of scrimmage. It's
Sure.
one of I think for any team to win any game of football at any level, they have to win the line of scrimmage. But
Sure.
I think it's especially true here when you're facing an opponent that has a dominant offensive line, has a dominant run game, and their quarterback has been making these great throws, making these great decisions, putting the ball where it needs to go when he has time.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so our picks are in.
Yep.
We managed to hold the show to an hour this time
How about
around.
that?
Yeah, how about that? So we shaved a whole half hour off of this, but it's been so much fun, and I can't wait to meet up again and talk again next Wednesday about what's going on in the world of football and F1 and just
Maybe
so
basketball?
maybe throw in some basketball. You never know.
Hmm.
Um, so anyway, appreciate you having me on again. And it's funny because a lot of the show is kind of again just almost like microphone putting a microphone in our living room with you and your brother growing up because we'd sit and talk about all this stuff for hours. So
For sure.
yeah, what a fun thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for joining me once again. Hopefully, we'll be able to be right back here again, same time next week. Um, but I guess without further ado, without anything else to add, thank you everybody for sticking with us and listening and watching all the way to the end. Be sure if you made it this far to follow and all that on Spotify, subscribe and like the YouTube video version of this episode. And like I mentioned, we have an Inside the Helmet Instagram page now where, in addition to posting clips of the podcast and whatnot, I'm also trying to put out some other posts that, maybe we do cover a little bit in the episodes, but also, like I mentioned, I made a whole post about the Cowboys defense and kind of taking out my frustration on Matt Eberflus on social media, and so follow for maybe some posts that aren't talked about on the podcast. Be trying to do more of those. Um, Without further ado, thank you guys. We'll see you guys next week.
All right, good night, everybody.
Good night.